There are rumors that have come up to the Hill of a secretive project within the Department of Defense.
I've been in a Twitter war.
All of the 7 mountains of society to be taken over.
Those people in the teachers' unions are Marxist, cultural Marxists, often gay.
We're trying to recruit you to tuck your penis.
If you believe in evolution, why don't you just kill people?
I'm like, well then let's go fight. I'll just kick his ass. How's that?
Welcome back to the Fever Swamp Review, a podcast from the Colorado Times Recorder. I'm your host, Heidi Beadle. And this week, Colorado Democrats finished up a special session that they held to address a $1.2 billion budget deficit that they argue was caused by President Donald Trump's one big beautiful bill. It was the federal budget reconciliation bill that Republicans kind of passed as part of their it's their budget, right? But they did this interesting kind of reconciliation method with the bill. And in fact, you know what? I was recently at the Capitol Club luncheon hosted by the Colorado Republican Party, and their guest of honor was Representative Gabe Evans, and he gives a pretty exhaustive discussion of what actually went into the reconciliation process. So here's Representative Gabe Evans talking about the budget reconciliation at this week's Capitol Club luncheon.
The vast majority of legislation in Washington, D.C. has to get 7 Democrat senators, to go along with it, because otherwise the Democrats can filibuster the Senate. The rules of that chamber mean you need 60 votes to break the filibuster. Republicans only have a 53 vote majority to 47 votes in the Senate. So with that is kind of the baseline for the political situation in Washington, D.C. What Republicans did, and the Democrats do it too when they have the House, the Senate, and the presidency, is we use this process called reconciliation, because reconciliation is one of just a few parliamentary processes by which something can pass through the Senate with a simple majority vote instead of needing to be able to clear that 60 vote threshold. And it's a very, very complex process that has a whole bunch of rules associated with it. Some of the rules are things like reconciliation has to be budgetary in nature. You can't do actual policy in reconciliation. It has to be budgetary. You can't do anything that touches Social Security in reconciliation. We'll come back to that in a second. And to actually pass reconciliation, you basically have to pass the bill twice. So think in terms of a household budget. You sit down and you say, okay, I'm going to spend $2,200 on housing, I'm going to spend $500 on food, I'm going to spend $250 on transportation. You're creating the pots of money, but you don't actually have any policy associated with that. You haven't decided whether or not you're going to buy peanut butter or almond butter. You haven't decided whether you're going to buy white cheese or yellow cheese. You're just creating the pots of money. That's what the reconciliation process looks like at the congressional level. The first time that you pass this bill, you're just creating the pots of money, and the pots of money are basically assigned by committee. So in Washington, D.C., I sit on 2 committees. I'm on the Homeland Security Committee. We have jurisdiction over basically all of the borders of the United States, air, land, sea. We have jurisdiction over most of the federal law enforcement agencies and some of the other agencies that fill that Homeland Security space. The Homeland Security Committee was the fun committee to be on through the reconciliation process, because that was the committee where we eventually decided on instructions that said Homeland Security can spend up to $90 billion to go secure our borders. But of course we have to pay for that, and we're Republicans. We don't like to do deficit spending, so we have to go find other ways to be able to reduce the deficit spending while actually paying for the important stuff. The other committee that I sit on is the Energy and Commerce Committee. Oldest committee in Congress, broadest jurisdiction of any committee in Congress. Basically, the U.S. economy flows through the Energy and Commerce Committee. And so the instructions to the Energy and Commerce Committee that we received were we need to find $880 billion in deficit reduction spending. Again, the United States is running somewhere around a $2 trillion annual deficit. We're spending $2 trillion more every year than we actually have money to pay for. Energy and Commerce had the biggest lift. We had to find an $880 billion deficit spending reduction to be able to pay for some of those things, and then also just be able to save money to bring down the deficit spending. So that was the first thing that we had to do in the reconciliation package, which, as we all know, became known as the Big Beautiful Bill, was we had to set those top line numbers. How much money are we either going to spend or save based on each committee that was involved in the process? But there's no actual policy, like budgetary policy. There's no line items that are being put yet into that bill. We're just agreeing on the top line level of spending instructions. So you gotta pass it the first time. Once the House and the Senate agree on it, then you come all the way back to square one, and you gotta pass it a second time, but this time actually populating those specific line items into the piece of legislation. And so that's where then we get into all of the different budgetary conversations about what are we spending money on? Do we need to spend money on that? Is there a more efficient way to spend money on that in order to meet those top line numbers? Because if you don't meet the top line numbers, then you lose that whole reconciliation bill. And so that was the second time that we had to pass it. The House puts together everything that they're working on, then it goes over to the Senate. In the Senate, you might have heard some conversation around the Senate parliamentarian, the Byrd rule. So all that is again, in the Senate, normally to break a filibuster, you gotta get to 60 votes. However, because this bill is following the reconciliation pathway, you can pass it through the Senate with 50 plus 1. To pass it by 50 plus 1, every single thing in that bill has to meet, it's a five-pronged test called the Byrd rule. And it's a Senate thing, it's not a House thing, it's a Senate thing. But it has to meet the Byrd rule test. It has to be predominantly budgetary in nature, so it can't be other policies, it's gotta be budgetary. It can't invoke Social Security. There's a couple other ones that I don't remember what they are because the budgetary one and the Social Security one were the big ones. And so the Senate parliamentarian is the one that sits there and says, does this particular part of the bill, does it meet all of the 5 criteria of the Byrd rule? If so, it can pass procedurally with 50 votes plus 1. If it does not meet the criteria of the Byrd rule, then it either has to be reworked or thrown out, or you gotta do something with it, because then otherwise it's subject to that higher 60 vote threshold. And so when you would hear the media reporting, oh, the parliamentarian threw it out, what the parliamentarian is saying is that particular policy, budgetary policy, is policy, not budget policy. You gotta go rework it and make it be predominantly budgetary in nature. In order for it to stay in, and then also be able to pass with that 50 vote plus 1 lower threshold. So that was the work that we've been doing in Washington, D.C.
So essentially, right, Republicans are trying to get their policy passed using like the budget mechanism, right? And, Democrats have pointed out that, this budget reconciliation bill is going to cause all kinds of problems. It's going to cut funding to vital services, particularly Medicaid, as well as things like food assistance and things of that nature. This is a comment from Representative Brittany Peterson back in May. Over the last few months, I've heard from countless Coloradans who are terrified of what this budget means for their families. This bill means kids will go hungry, thousands of people will die without access to health care, and the progress we've made in fighting the opioid crisis will be erased. Hospitals and nursing homes will shutter, and the healthcare costs for all of us will skyrocket. All to give the wealthiest people in the history of the world more tax giveaways on the backs of the rest of us. And in many sectors, Pedersen's warning seems to have been borne out. Last week, I attended a press event at the office of Congressman Jason Crow, the Democrat from Aurora, and he was hearing from Planned Parenthood folks, and this is Jack Teeter, the Vice President of Government Relations, I believe is the title, for Planned Parenthood, and he's talking specifically about the impact that the federal reconciliation bill, which banned funding specifically to Planned Parenthood, and then they sued over it, and there was an injunction, and that it was lifted. It's gone back and forth. It's a whole thing. There's a specific Planned Parenthood angle to the reconciliation bill, but here's Jack Teeter kind of explaining what the impact has been for Planned Parenthood.
With what it's been like since July 4th. Mm-hmm. So the bill was signed on the 4th of July, and that evening our health center staff were calling patients who were at parties with their families, trying to enjoy the day off, to tell them that their appointment maybe the next morning was canceled, with no information on when we could get them rescheduled, and that because of an intersection with Colorado law that makes it so Medicaid patients cannot self-pay for care, cannot go out of network, there's no way to see them. And over the next several days, patients were still coming to the health centers hoping to be seen.
Yeah.
We had patients canceling their Medicaid on their cell phones in our waiting rooms begging to be seen. We obviously have patients in a great deal of distress. There was a lot of confusion to work through with the department around, for example, if a patient had come in for an STI test before the shutdown, and then we got their positive results after July 4th, could we call them to give them their test results? Or do we need to try to give those results to the health department so the health department will contact them? So really just absolutely severing our relationship with our patients. There has since been a temporary restraining order, which then expired. We had to cancel appointments a second time. Now there's a stay. It is possible that the U.S. Supreme Court will issue a nationwide stay on the current injunction tomorrow or Friday.
Okay.
And so we're really racing against the clock right now with Colorado's special session, which is going to start tomorrow. So we have a plan. During the special session tomorrow, we're introducing a bill that would allow the department to pay us using state general fund dollars in the absence of a federal match, and that would sort of protect our patients and give us a little bit of stability as this kind of bobs back and forth through the courts.
Okay.
But it really is racing against the clock, because if the Supreme Court issues a nationwide stay on Thursday, we might have to cancel patient appointments again, and then try to resume them again on Sunday. And so that's obviously traumatic for our staff. It's traumatic for our patients. We know that the chaos and the cruelty is the point of this bill. We canceled 991 appointments during the first chunk of the cancellation before the temporary restraining order came on board. So it's, it is an existential threat to the organization. Planned Parenthood in Louisiana has closed their doors. One of the California affiliates has closed 6 health centers. So I can't possibly overstate, how serious this is for our continued ability to serve our patients. And the rest of the state primary care infrastructure cannot just absorb our patients. There are too many patients who receive care at Planned Parenthood to just sort of be absorbed.
That was going to be my question. What are they doing? Right? What do you tell your patients, and where do they go?
It depends. There are other great Medicaid partners in the primary care space. We are referring people to the university and to Denver Health and to independent providers. But it depends on the services. And a lot of patients come to Planned Parenthood because they have been deeply disenfranchised from the healthcare system for their entire lives. And they want to come somewhere that recognizes them in the fullness of themselves and who they are and their identity. And so it's very difficult for a lot of our most marginalized patients to just find another primary care provider who can care for them.
Okay. All right. That's brutal. That's really brutal. And the staff, how's the staff hanging in?
It's traumatic to have to call patients on the phone and tell them their appointments are canceled. I think for a lot of our providers who, for most of their careers, have been in states like Colorado that are safe havens, this is in some cases the first time that politics has prevented them from seeing their patients. We know that our colleagues in other states have been experiencing that since the fall of Roe. But the trauma and the whiplash on the providers is serious, and it's very devastating. I mean, we had a patient who was referred to us by the local emergency department. She was having a missed abortion. The emergency room said that she would best receive care at Planned Parenthood, so they sent her to us, and then we had to turn her away, bleeding, back to the hospital, even though the hospital had sent her to us. A patient whose mother had died of breast cancer in her 30s, who had multiple aunts who had also been diagnosed with breast cancer in their 20s and 30s. She's in her 20s. She was coming in for a breast exam and a referral to genetic counseling, and her appointment was canceled. Patients who were in the middle of a treatment course for syphilis, who had had their first appointment but then couldn't come in for their second appointment, and what does that mean? And so the impact that has on staff morale is significant. I mean, it's just devastating for people.
Yeah, totally.
And of course, the Republican response to all of this has essentially been no, it's not. They have all kinds of defenses for, the budget deficit here in Colorado, which it's all the Democrats' fault, and to like the impact that this bill is going to have on Medicaid, right? They argue that it's just means testing and making sure that it's like qualified people are getting the Medicaid and kicking off all the people who don't deserve it and all of the people who shouldn't be getting it and all of these things. So here is Colorado Springs area representative, well, he's CD5 congressional representative Jeff Crank. Last week went on the Jeff and Bill show to talk about some of the impact that the bill has had, and how, again, the budget deficit that Colorado is now facing that caused the special session is not the Republicans' fault. Let's take a listen.
The Jeff and Bill show on 710 KNUS. Democrats at the state capitol are pointing the finger at Donald Trump and Republicans in Congress for Colorado's $1 billion budget shortfall. That's right. Jared Polis and the Democrats want you to believe that their record-breaking spending spree, their radical green energy mandates, and their sanctuary state policies somehow aren't to blame. Let's be honest. Colorado's budget has doubled. Our tax revenues are at a historic high, and yet because of out-of-control spending, Democrats are now crying poverty. Instead of tightening their belts like families have to, they're gearing up for another round of tax hikes, fees, and raids on Tabor refunds. Joining us now is Representative Jeff Crank. He represents the Colorado Springs area here in Colorado in Congress. Congressman, are you to blame for the $1 billion budget deficit here in Colorado?
Well, if you ask the Democrats, I suppose we are. Yeah, it's amazing. I mean, you talked about it, the record-breaking spending that we've had in Colorado. It's just out of control. And let's be clear. And the reason that the one big beautiful bill that we passed changed some of the revenue that comes into the state of Colorado is because we provided tax cuts to the American people. And, most of the tax cuts that were extended were already accounted for. So those aren't the real problems for the Democrats. The ones that the Democrats really are fussing about is no tax on tips, no tax on overtime, increasing the child tax credit and indexing it for inflation, and senior tax exemption of $6,000. These are all the things that every Coloradan who makes under $150,000 a year, by the way, every one of those applies to folks who make $150,000 a year or less. That's what they're complaining about. And really what happened, Jeff, and I know you know this, but the fact that we lowered those taxes means that the federal adjusted gross income of Coloradans will be lowered. And therefore, when you start your Colorado tax return, the first question it asks you is, what was your federal adjusted gross income? Well, it's going to be lower because we lowered taxes. And so they're bulking about that. Well, how about cutting spending instead of talking about all these ways to increase taxes? I mean, there is no greater example of the difference between an out-of-control left Democrat cause and what we've been doing and what we did in the One Big Beautiful Bill.
Yeah, and here's what I think is important for people to understand. As you just perfectly explained, our tax rate is tied to the federal tax rate there. So there's less money going into the federal government because taxes have been reduced. So where did that money go? It didn't just disappear. That money is staying with you, people of Colorado. Yeah. And the Democrats at the Colorado State Capitol have less money coming to government because it's staying in your pocketbook.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And, again, how about cutting benefits to illegals? How about stopping the war on oil and gas and allowing some revenue maybe to come in that way by letting oil and gas wells be drilled again? I mean, there's a million ways that they could actually get revenue into the budget without hurting people. And there's a million ways that they could continue to cut spending. But you said it best. I mean, they've been on a spending spree ever since they took unified control of our government, and they haven't taken their foot off the gas.
And I want to bring this up, this poll that was released earlier this week, CBS 4 covering it. And the number one concern of Coloradans is, one, the government doesn't work for them. And then two, everything is more expensive. Healthcare, education, food. It doesn't seem like our roads are getting there. Real estate taxes are going up. I mean, it just feels like everything is getting more expensive. The basic services aren't being delivered. Representative Jeff Crank, 5th Congressional District, Colorado Springs. What do you think is going through the mind of a voter right now? They've put Democrats in control of every aspect of Colorado government, with the exception of a handful of congressional districts. Yet they're frustrated about the direction of the state, of the costs of the state. Do you think they've connected yet the fact that everything's gotten more expensive since Democrats have gotten elected, and services have gotten worse? Has that connection been made?
Well, I hope so, Jeff. I mean, how could you not make it, right? And they've been given control, and we are one of the most regulated states. We're overregulated in Colorado. I was at a Colorado Chamber of Commerce event just last week, and they were talking about that. I mean, that's their main goal in the next session, is to try and get us to be a little bit less regulated of a state. I mean, look at healthcare. They've put mandates on what kind of health coverage can be issued. Look at our car insurance. All of these things are related to the overregulation that the left and the Democrats have done at the state legislature. And, you know, what have they been focused on? They're focused on DEI. They're focused on taking away parental rights. They're focused on taking away gun rights, rather than fixing Colorado for so many people. You know, I went on a ride-along 2 nights ago. I was out carousing with the Fountain Police Department until almost 3 a.m. the other night with them. And you know, they're frustrated. Our law enforcement's frustrated. They're arresting the same people time and time again. We arrested a guy who had 29 charges on his rap sheet, 29. And they arrested him again. And they said, well, he had some drugs, lots of drugs on him, but he didn't have enough of any one drug to qualify to actually have a charge against him. And that's something the Democrats did, was reduce, you don't even get charged if you have, I think, less than 4 grams of a certain drug on you. So it's crazy. The crime is out of control. All of this is happening because the left is worried about the wrong things. The Democrats have worried about the wrong things in the state legislature.
Gosh, that is exactly right. That's Representative Jeff Crank. He represents the Colorado Springs area in Congress, Washington, D.C. So you're doing ride-alongs. President Trump's doing ride-alongs. I've done a ride-along before. And, brother, I don't think I understood what it's like to be law enforcement until you do a ride-along, because in many ways you kind of feel like there's a target on your back. Right? Everybody notices you, and you're just like, man, one crazy guy could do something. I mean, what was your sense during that ride-along? Have you done those before?
I have. I've done 5 ride-alongs with local law enforcement. I did a ride-along with our fire department. All since I've gotten elected, I've done those. I love doing them. I mean, they're fun. You know, I'm a guy, by the way, Jeff, that, I mean, I've always watched, you know, I could sit and watch cops for hours. I mean, I'm that kind of guy. But you know what? It's totally different when you're there. When you pull up behind a car and, you know, the officer tries to shine that light into the back of the car and get some sense of what might be in that car. But when you step out and you open those doors and you start walking up, you have no idea. On every single stop, you have no idea what's coming. You don't know if the back window is going to start blowing out because the guy's firing shots at you. You have no idea. And that's something that we take for granted every day, that our law enforcement does that for us. And by the way, when I talked about the no tax on overtime, those cops love it because so many of them get paid by overtime. And when I told them, hey, by the way, this is all retroactive to January 1st of 2025. They were just beside themselves. I mean, they know whose side the Democrats are on, and they know whose side the Republicans are on. Let's be honest, when it comes to law and order, they know. They understand. The police officers understand whose side each political party in Colorado is on.
That's Jeff Crank, member of Congress, joining Jeff and Bill live. I want to follow up. You just talked a little bit about the no tax on tips and no overtime taxes and those. If there's such a great idea, if it's such a boon to Colorado voters and the average working person, why do they sunset? Why were they not made permanent in the big, beautiful bill?
Well, I mean, it's a matter of money. Hi, Bill, by the way. It's a matter of money. I mean, we had to balance, because if we'd have made all of those things permanent, then you guys would have complained on the left even more about it. I mean, it's a balancing act of trying to get all of this in, and we felt that it was very much more important to make sure that capital gains, that the doubling of the standard exemption, those things were made permanent. And we thought it was much more important to get that stuff done so that there could be investment in the United States. We would have loved to make all of that permanent. But, again, the difference here is we made those tax cuts, and I'd love to make them permanent. They're going to expire if we don't do something in a couple of years. But now you've got the left making the argument that they want to, in Colorado, they want to tax overtime, or they want to tax tips. So, it's just a fundamental difference in the view of government.
Yeah, well, explain that to me, though, is the idea that we need to make the capital gains tax cuts permanent, but the average working person, the person that would actually directly benefit from no taxes on tips and no taxes on overtime, those are temporary. Doesn't it seem that you're playing favorites, that we have to insulate the people that are on the upper end of the income spectrum, those that are already insulated, and that you're going to leave the others out to be a political tool later on? I agree with the no tax on tips and no tax on overtimes, but I disagree with the idea that talking it as a selling point to bring value to the Colorado voter, yet the fact that it wasn't permanent. I mean, you could have changed it and made the others temporary and done this one as permanent. You had the power.
Bill, I get it. I understand what you're saying, but there wasn't a single Democrat who voted in the House of Representatives. Not one Democrat voted to not have tax on tips, or to not have tax on overtime.
With respect, though, I don't care. You guys have enough numbers. You guys can get that through regardless. If you have all the Republicans vote through it, you don't need a Democrat vote. I don't care if the Democrats support it or not. That seems irrelevant.
Well, okay, but then why are you? What gives you then the right to argue it should have been made permanent when your party didn't even choose?
Hold on. Whoa. Stop, Jeff.
The
Jeff,
party
stop.
you defend.
Stop.
Bill,
No.
the party you
Jeff,
defend.
Jeff,
Bill,
stop.
the party you defend.
Jeff,
how about that?
Excuse me. We need to be accurate here. I am not a registered member of any party, and just to put a pin on this, I haven't been for over 25 years. For 25 years, I've been unaffiliated. Now, again, I'm going to set the record straight because we have not had this conversation. And I'm not going to sit here and hold you responsible for being wrong because we have not had this conversation. But I was at once, and again, no, Jeff, with respect, okay? Hang on. You need to understand where I came from before you sit here and impugn me on the air. I was a registered Republican. I left the Republican Party. I've never been a Democrat. While it is convenient to paint me as a liberal or a Democrat, it is inaccurate and unfair. So the question I've got, I'm talking here about the no tax on tips and no tax on overtime, which is about working people, which is something that you're trumpeting. And I am agreeing with you on the Republican platform. The question I have is of priorities. You prioritize, and the rest of the GOP, the cuts for the millionaires and billionaires and the people that are insulated on that end of the income spectrum, and you left the other ones at the bottom out to dry because their tax cuts expire. I don't like that.
All right, let's give Jeff a chance to respond. Representative Crank.
Yeah, Bill, I mean, first of all, if I called you the worst word in the world and I called you a Democrat in your mind, I'm sorry for that. But yeah, how about this? I'll rephrase it. The party that you continue to defend day in and day out.
That's also inaccurate.
I'll just point out,
again, also inaccurate.
Is that accurate?
Bill,
no, it's not.
Let him finish. All right, Representative, please.
Be accurate?
All right. Okay. Representative Craig.
I will be accurate. It's the party that you defend day in and day out. And that's what you're doing right here is you're defending a bunch of people. Yes, you are. You're defending a party that fought against tax cuts for working people. They fought against it. That's what the Democrats did. They didn't want any of this tax relief to begin with. And now you're criticizing the Republicans because we tried to fit some tax relief in for the working men and women of this country. And they voted against it, and we voted for it. And that's the real reality, and that's the bottom line. I mean, I've heard this the whole time on the big, beautiful bill. I get Democrats talking about, oh, you know, it was this happened, and this happened, and half the stuff they talk about, they're lying about. But then we go to things like, you know, we increased defense spending by $150 billion in this bill. Republicans generally agree with that. Democrats didn't. But would you have voted for the big, beautiful bill? I don't know, Bill. But how about the fact that we increased base allowance for housing for our soldiers? Every Democrat who voted against the big, beautiful bill voted against increasing base allowance housing increase for our men and women of the military. They got to own their votes. They can't have it both ways, and neither can you, Bill.
I'm not having it both ways. I'm criticizing
yes,
the priorities. No, I'm not.
Yes, you are.
With respect, Jeff, you need to go back and listen to the show. You can listen this week and find our discussion about Mike Johnston and the budget in Denver. Go back and look at how I've criticized Colorado Democrats in this special session, coming with new funding. No, you talk to me about defending a party, and I'm not defending that party. It's easy to label me that way, but that's inaccurate.
Would you have voted for the big, beautiful bill if you were in Congress, Bill?
No, probably not, based on things like what I'm out. Hang on, wait.
Vote, Bill.
No, hang on. I am owning the vote, if you'll let me finish the sentence, based on the idea of the priorities. The fact that if I'm sitting there and I'm a member of Congress and you're asking me to prioritize tax cuts for things like capital gains, and I'm not going to permanently make the no tax on tips or no taxes on overtime, no.
But Bill,
I'm going to focus on the other end of it, and I'm sorry that that's imperfect.
But because it's not perfect, you wouldn't have supported it? I mean, what Jeff Crank delivered and what Republicans delivered was tax relief for everybody, whether it's capital gains taxes or no tax on tips. They deliver tax relief. And so because it's not permanent, you'd rather have working class continue to pay taxes on their tips? No,
what I would do is I would go back and I would have changed the bill. It's not that hard because Jeff's part of the process that has the ability to change it. Bill. It's not as if this bill came down from Mount Sinai on a bunch of stone tablets.
Jeff Crank.
Well, Bill, here's the reality. Democrats, I get it. You don't want to defend them, though you are defending their vote when you defend voting against the big, beautiful bill.
That's a wrong binary choice,
yes,
but continue.
Are.
No, I'm not.
Bill, of course you are.
No, I'm
not.
Yes,
you are. It was a vote, yes or no. You couldn't say, well, gee, I wish it was better this way or that way. If you were a member of Congress, you vote yes or you vote no.
But I'm not defending their vote. But I'm not defending their vote as you're characterizing it. That's where I'm pushing back.
But you just said you'd vote no.
Hang on a sec. I would vote no, and I outlined why, but I'm not defending the Democrats on all their objections as to why.
Well, that's fair.
I have this objection. And there were other Republicans that had other objections.
Okay, go ahead.
Yes. Yeah, Bill, there's things in the big, beautiful bill I didn't like. I didn't like the SALT exemption, but they had to do it to get the votes to pass because we had Democrats in Congress who refused to vote for a bill that provided tax relief for, no tax on tips. We had Democrats who refused to work with us. So, and here's the last thing I'd point out. The people that voted against that in Congress, they had several years. They had 4 years to do whatever they wanted, and they chose not to make permanent cuts to tax on tips or permanent cuts to tax on overtime because they want more money coming into the federal government, and that's a reality.
Well, and Representative Crank, I think that's confirmed by what you see with Democrat leadership here in Colorado.
Yeah,
they've never cut taxes. Ever.
Yeah.
At any point, once we have record spending, we have record taxation on Coloradans, and so
they're coming back during the special session trying to increase
taxes.
Spending again.
That's right.
We pilloried them, myself included.
I mean,
on the show.
I understand the critique that, gosh, maybe we should have made this permanent. But I still think the big, beautiful bill is delivering for people. Is it perfect? Absolutely not. But it is a heck of a lot better than what you get when Democrats are in control. And the best example of that is what's happening at the state capitol. Representative Crank, you've been incredibly generous with your time.
Yes,
I'll give you the final word.
Especially with me, sir. Yeah, okay. Bill, let's go back to the days where we stood and took pictures together and smiled and all of that. Look, I get it. I understand what you're saying. You've been critical of Democrats, and I'll praise you for that. You're critical of some folks when they're wrong. I get it. But the reality is, too, when we vote in Congress, we have a yes or a no. We can't say, I wish the bill were better. Okay, I wish the bill were better, but you either vote yes or you vote no at the end of the day. So I get it. But look, this special session, the Democrats are doing it. They're trying to do a bait and switch. They're trying to blame Republicans in Washington for the failures that they've had, the overspending that they've had, and the people should not let him get away with it.
Now, let me close this on a nice note here. Congressman Crank, I agree with you. I thank you so much for the time, and you are 110% right that the Democrats here in Colorado are wrong because their profligate spending got us to a budget deficit of somewhere between 600 and 700 million. Then coming and crying crocodile tears about the big, beautiful bill has now got us at $1 billion budget deficit. You guys overspent. They need to own that. And you know, Jeff, you're also saying, I have a luxury that you don't have. You are right. You had to vote for the bill one way or another. Because I can sit here on this radio show and you've sat behind this microphone as well, I have the luxury of pointing out that I want the no tax on tips and I want the other things to be changed. I have that luxury that in times when you're right in Congress, you may not be afforded that luxury. And I am taking that luxury and I appreciate it, and I appreciate the willingness to engage on it intellectually. Next time we see a man, smiles and we'll hang out and we'll take pictures. I got no animosity, but this has been fun.
Okay, it sounds like we're going to go to lunch later today.
Absolutely, man. I'd be happy to.
All right.
Just don't throw a French fry at me.
Sounds good.
That's Representative Jeff Crank, a famed radio host as well. He gets it. He likes to have fun. And you can follow him on X at Jeff Crank. He's doing a wonderful job for the people of the 5th District of Colorado. In fact, endorsed again by President Donald Trump. Jeff Crank, thank you for your time this morning, Congressman.
I can't thank you enough, sir. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you, Jeff. Appreciate it, guys.
And Gabe Evans at his Capitol Club luncheon event also addressed some of the pushback from Democrats about the big, beautiful bill. Here's Representative Evans.
We're finding ways to make sure that we are being efficient stewards of taxpayer money. You'll hear the folks on the other side wail about how Republicans cut Medicaid. And I don't let anyone use the word cut Medicaid around me because Republicans put $200 billion into Medicaid additional in the next 10 years. Medicaid spending will go up by double digits under the Republican plan. It just doesn't go to over 1 million illegal immigrants that were receiving Medicaid dollars. It doesn't go to able-bodied people who refuse to work or go to school or volunteer part-time. Part-time being defined as 80 hours a month. So if you're able-bodied and you don't have young kids, we probably put an exception in there for young kids. There's a ton of exceptions in there. You struggle with substance abuse, you have mental health issues. Guess what? You're not able-bodied. You're taking care of young kids. We're not making you go to work. It's only able-bodied people without young kids are required to work, go to school, or volunteer part-time in order to receive their free taxpayer-funded health care benefits. And we also said that states need to clean up their act a little bit, because as you recall, Medicaid, the feds write a big part of the check, but the states are who administer the program. And unfortunately, you have states like Colorado that do a horrible job of administering Medicaid, to the point where we found 2.8 million duplicates in the country. So what does that mean? Well, you're in New Mexico and you enroll in Medicaid. The way the feds do the paperwork, the feds figure out how many people are on Medicaid in New Mexico. They run their equations based off that, and then they cut a check to New Mexico. Well, if that individual who's enrolled in Medicaid in New Mexico then moves to Colorado, but they never come off the books in New Mexico, Now the feds are paying twice. They're paying once in New Mexico, he's still on the books in New Mexico, and they're paying once in Colorado. If that individual then keeps moving north and goes to Wyoming, now the feds are paying 3 times. 2.8 million duplicates in the country. People that are eligible for the program, but are getting paid for twice. These are the things that we did to protect and preserve Medicaid for the people who need it. You have disabilities, you're elderly, you're pregnant, you're a kid, guess what? Nothing's happening to your Medicaid. We put $200 billion more into Medicaid for those individuals. We just wanted to go to the people that need it and are eligible for it. We did that by putting those guardrails in place to make the states be better stewards of the taxpayer money, to make sure that illegal immigrants can't get it, and if you're an able-bodied, working-age adult without young kids, you gotta work, go to school, and volunteer part-time for your Medicaid. 2 quick things, because I'm bumping up on my 20 minutes here that I want to hit. You'll hear Democrats say the Republicans cut SNAP, basically food stamps. Here's how the food stamp program works. The federal government measures, did it die? Hello, there we are. The federal government measures the error rate in SNAP. Colorado, under the previous governor, Hickenlooper, Colorado was below 6% in their error rate in SNAP. Under our new governor, we've shot up to 10%. So what the Fed said, what we said in the big beautiful bill, is if a state can get below 6% error rate, which newsflash, the previous governor did for both his terms. If you can get below 6% error rate, you can get 100% of your federal funding for Medicaid benefits. If you're over 6%, then there's an incentive to make the state start cleaning up their program, then the state has to kick in money. So, we've got folks down at the state capitol right now, Democrats, who are wailing about this $1.2 so-called billion-dollar budget hole that the big beautiful bill supposedly put into the state of Colorado's budgets. They're not telling you the truth there, because some of the things that they're talking about, like SNAP, Colorado could get every penny of SNAP benefit money that we previously got, as long as we just stop making 10% error, 10% of the payments being errors or inaccurate or inappropriate payments. You get below 6%, Colorado doesn't have to kick in any more money. It's cleaning up the program to be efficient stewards of taxpayer money and get the resources to where they're needed. And since I talked about the state legislature, this will be my last topic, and then we can open it up for some questions. In the state of Colorado, there's 3 numbers you need to know. The state of Colorado's population under Polis, and I date from Polis because, as you recall, up until 2018, we held the state Senate. So we still had some balance in Colorado as recently as 2018. 2019, when Polis took over and the Democrats took the state House and the state Senate, that's where I date a lot of my statistics to. Since 2019, the state of Colorado's population has gone up by about 5%. Inflation in the state of Colorado has gone up by about 26%. But state spending has gone up by 50%. Adjusted for population and inflation, the state of Colorado still has more money today per person, inflation adjusted, than really at any point in modern history. The state of Colorado does not have a revenue problem. The state of Colorado has a spending problem. They were banking the Democrats who run the state were banking on the largest tax hike in American history going into effect, and they already spent the money. And since Republicans prevented that tax hike from going into effect, now you've got Democrats who are looking for someone to blame for their out-of-control taxing and feeing and spending habits, and rather than actually take accountability for it, they're in special session right now figuring out how to fleece the taxpayers in Colorado of more taxes and more fees. And again, this is happening against a backdrop where they already have more money adjusted for population and inflation than at any point really in Colorado's history. This is why we're going to be able to hold not only my seat, but why we're going to be able to make inroads in Colorado as long as we hang together as Republicans and as conservatives. And we welcome in our new members who are like-minded. Reagan said it himself. Reagan said, if you agree with me 80% of the time, that makes you an 80% ally, not a 20% enemy. Ben Franklin said it himself at the founding of our country, as only Ben Franklin can, hang together or hang separate. If we hang together, if we carry this message about how Republicans are putting more money in your pockets, we're helping the economy, we're cutting punitive red tape and overregulation, we are taking care of border security and community safety. On average, this is a Colorado number, on average, the average taxpayer in Colorado will get over $2,000 in hard money back into their wallets as a result of all of the tax stuff that we just talked about. And the overall impact to the economy will be somewhere around $10,000 in actual real wage growth for your average Colorado family because of all of the good tax stuff that we've done, because we've cut punitive red tape, we've cut punitive regulation, we've empowered the economy, we're rewarding workers and entrepreneurs and innovators, we're keeping our community safe. Those are the things that Americans and Coloradans want us to do. We are being good stewards of taxpayer money. That is the message that helped us flip my seat last fall, and you could not get a more clear contrast between what Republicans in Congress have done with something like no taxes on overtime. You all know Democrats preemptively re-taxed overtime earlier this year. Republicans are putting more money back into the pockets of working class Americans, and Democrats are taking that money right back out. That is the message, as long as we hang together, that is going to make sure that we can continue on the momentum that we've built, that we can hold my seat, that we can flip some of these other seats, we can get back to a balanced point in Colorado and continue to make Colorado and the United States a safe place to live, to work, and to raise families. Thank you all for coming out today.
Gabe Evans also specifically addressed kind of the concerns around Planned Parenthood. I mean, he didn't address them directly. He kind of like pivot, whatever. Here's Gabe Evans answering a question about Planned Parenthood funding.
Yeah, so the question was, is Colorado taking state money to go fund Planned Parenthood? Yeah, that was actually a ballot initiative last year. At the federal level, you have this thing called the Heidi Amendment that says federal taxpayer dollars can't go to fund abortions. There's certain exceptions to it. And the state of Colorado continues to take taxpayer funding for that. Also for things like healthcare for illegal immigrants. So they passed, don't quote me on this number because I don't know if the bill's been passed yet, but talking to some of my colleagues down at the state capitol, it was being discussed somewhere around $35 million of state taxpayer money going to fund healthcare for illegal immigrants in the state of Colorado. So you want to talk about a budget hole? I know 2024, the last year I was down at the state capitol, the state of Colorado spent over $100 million on illegal immigrants just in 2024. City and County of Denver is somewhere around $350 million over the last couple of years. So a lot of this so-called budget deficit is self-inflicted precisely from what you're talking about. They want to take the money and allocate it to things like taxpayer funding for healthcare for illegal immigrants.
So, as you can see, none of these things, like even though the Republicans have the presidency and the House and the Senate, the consequences of the budget that they passed is not the Republicans' fault. It is still somehow the Democrats' fault. Funny how that works. So that's it for the podcast today. If you've enjoyed this podcast, even if you haven't, please make sure that you like and subscribe and leave a comment. Who do you think is to blame, Democrats or Republicans? And leave your response in the comments. If you appreciate the reporting of the Colorado Times Recorder and you like this podcast, please keep in mind that our reporting is made possible by the generous donations of viewers and readers like you. So if you're so inclined, please visit coloradotimesrecorder.com and make a tax-deductible donation to our nonprofit newsroom. Also, make sure to follow us on social media. We're on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, Blue Sky, some other lesser platforms. Just give us a follow. Please share this video. Tell your friends. Thank you for watching, and stay safe out there, folks.